Over the last few days, OpenAI's new ChatGPT has been making headlines, and it's probably hard to overestimate how much artificial intelligence is going to change our lives and the economy. So I asked OpenAI's chatbot whether the recent developments of OpenAI represent a threat to Alphabet's, so Google's core business, Google Search, which as of September 30th represents around 60% of Alphabet's total revenue. And according to the chatbot, OpenAI is not a threat to search engines. But honestly, I don't agree with the chatbot's response. And I do think that chatbots have the potential to make Google search obsolete. So is OpenAI's chatbot really going to kill Google's core business? Or does Google have some advantages too that may help the business fend off some of the new competitors? This will be the topic of today's video. And so without further ado, let's get started. Alright, so search is an area that is dominated by Google search, which runs around 99,000 search queries per second, which adds up to a whopping 8.5 billion searches per day, which again represents a market share of around 92%. Over the last 9 months of Google's 2022 fiscal year, for example, the business generated $120 billion in revenue just from search. But this business is possibly about to be disrupted by a new technology, namely AI and large language models that can read, summarize and translate texts and predict future words in a sentence, letting them generate sentences similar to how humans talk and write. So let me just show you a couple of examples that highlight why chatbots like OpenAI's ChatGPT might actually represent a very real threat to the business behemoth Google and its Google search division. For instance, when you ask the chatbot to create a detailed 1-week travel plan to Paris for someone who loves French food and who wants to stay in a 4-star hotel, you get the following response. I think the result is pretty damn impressive. There's no need to Google for restaurants, no need to Google for hotel suggestions, and the central pillars of your trip are basically planned. And this was done within 5 seconds. I then asked it, can you recommend a particular cinema in Paris and tell me how I can get there from my hotel using public transportation systems? And again, the results make Google almost obsolete, as I don't have to filter through lots of different links that may be provided by Google. I just get a very concise recommendation by the OpenAI chatbot instead. And although the chatbot's results are not always perfect and sometimes false information is presented with a high degree of confidence by the bot itself, which also bears its risks, I think improvements over time are inevitable. Now personally, I find the ChatGPT chatbot so useful that I already asked my iPhone to create an app for it that is now located on my phone's home screen. And I found myself using ChatGPT instead of Google multiple times a day already. For instance, I recently had a debate with a friend about the right amount of carbohydrates per day and whether carbohydrates are bad. And instead of Googling for some arguments, I just asked the ChatGPT to write a short scientific essay that outlines why carbohydrates aren't as bad as they are maybe sometimes presented as in the media, especially for young male athletes. And I can think of many more use cases ranging from quick tutorials, for example, how do I fix a dripping shower head, to more conceptual requests. Why should I buy the iPhone 14 instead of the iPhone 13? To productive requests like writing or fixing code or writing blog entries on topics X, Y, or Z. So are we witnessing the start of a rising competitive intensity in search? For the first time in the last few decades, basically. Arguably, it is not only OpenAI that has the potential to dethrone Google. No, Microsoft, the tech behemoth, recently announced its ambitions to launch a so-called super app that combines shopping, messaging, web search, newsfeed, and other services in one single app, like WeChat in China. Now, I do have a couple of thoughts on the threat that OpenAI in particular may represent for Google that I want to share with you today. So I think to understand why the OpenAI chatbot is a threat to Google's core business, first of all, you have to understand how Google makes money on Google search. Simply put, I would say Google makes money primarily through advertising, and more specifically performance-based advertising, at least for the most part. This means when people use Google to search for something online, the search engine might display ads that are related to the search term. Businesses can actually target specific locations, languages and audiences, and they pay Google to display their ads, mostly on a pay-per-click basis, meaning businesses only pay Google when someone actually clicks on their ad. Now, the problem with a chatbot like ChatGPT is that there are no longer links. The quality of the answers of the chatbot is on average of higher quality and more time efficient than when you Google something and then have to basically fight your way through the various links that are provided by Google. And I think this creates a problem because of course you could argue that Google could just copy what ChatGPT does and integrate it into their own services. Just like Facebook, for example, has copied features like stories from Snapchat. Or similarly, Microsoft has been copying solutions from competitors like, for instance, Slack or Zoom for decades. However, if there are no links, there is no monetization, or maybe one can figure out some form of monetization for search results like the ones provided by a chatbot, but the monetization possibilities may be less attractive. Now, if we do assume that the results of a chatbot are harder to monetize, this puts Google in a difficult position, in a dilemma. Sure, Google is already spending billions on AI, and its AI business division, DeepMind, has actually come up with numerous programs that outperform humans in games like Go, StarCraft or Stratego, for example, and they even solved a 50-year-old protein folding challenge. Moreover, they are also into autonomous driving with Waymo, and in their latest annual report, they actually outlined that they are exploring options to make use of AI in search too. Quote unquote, "We are currently experimenting with multitask unified model capabilities to make searching more natural and intuitive and even enable entirely new ways to search." So maybe based on their AI know-how, copying the functions of ChatGPT may not be that hard. Although, to be honest, I really don't know. I would assume that OpenAI probably has a major head start in this area. But then again, Google has access to so much data that this probably gives them a slight edge too. But even if they could copy it, I think monetizing the search results is harder than the traditional Google search business. And then Google would basically cannibalize its own search business, which as of now, as we've shown in the beginning of the video, represents the majority of their profits. And we do know that businesses are often reluctant to innovate if this will kill their traditional legacy business. And I think this is actually expressed in the so-called innovator's dilemma, which is a concept developed by Harvard Business School professor Clayton Christensen, and it refers to the situation where a successful company is facing a new market or technological challenges, but resists to change and continues to rely on its established strategies and products, even as they become less effective. Because as I just said, this old strategy is generating the majority of profits. So long story short, Google has probably more to lose than to gain here. And even though Google's valuation is already somewhat depressed, especially relative to the stock's history, if the AI disruption narrative gains traction, there's probably some downside to the stock's current valuation left. Now, the bull case, on the other hand, might be that search results from a chatbot may actually be monetized at an even better rate, because the chatbot could offer you just the best paid option when looking for a hotel in Paris, for instance. And for the user, it may be very hard to tell that there is an ad in the first place. So in a way, it could blur the distinction between paid and non-paid search results, and this may actually be a net positive. With Google in its current form, for example, personally, I almost never click on the first couple of results, which are paid ads. And so as I just said, a chatbot might actually be a net positive when that distinction between paid and not paid search results becomes more blurry. Now, full disclaimer, I own Google and I'm not going to sell my Google shares here. I think Google is a reasonably diversified business, even though search represents the majority of Google's revenue. But they also possess other valuable businesses like Google Cloud, YouTube or Android, to name just a couple of examples. What I'm going to do is I will observe the situation very carefully. I will observe whether people form a new habit here. Will they start chatbotting something instead of quickly Googling something? Now, what's important to mention here is that in 2010 and 2011, when Apple launched Siri, people also thought that Siri represented a major threat to Google search. Now, around 10 years later, we know that Siri couldn't really dethrone Google search. So the habit formation, that is what I will actually obsessively focus on from now going forward. Because this, so the habit of Googling, may actually be Google's strongest competitive advantage. Maybe ChatGPT has the potential to be better at, I would call it a subset of search queries. And people will use it mainly for knowledge-based search queries, while the more valuable search queries in terms of ad revenue, like when, for example, someone is looking for a hotel, for a specific lawyer, a fund manager, or a mortgage lender, those search queries might still require a link and will therefore remain on the Google search platform. All right, to learn more about how ChatGPT may actually influence the world of investing, I recommend you watch the following video next. Take care.